Happy Friday, guys, and welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Dubs. I'm your host, Bill T. Well, it's Friday, and it's time for another podcast. And as we've been doing the past couple episodes, we're going to try to start working on some history podcasts for you guys, as well as our continued interview style podcast that we do, bringing you the people in the VW scene. So hopefully you guys are enjoying the last couple. I got some decent feedback on it, so I figured we would do one more, and that's what today's podcast is going to be about. But before we get into that, make sure you guys support our sponsors, VW Trends Magazine. Go subscribe today. VW Trends Magazine, not the same old stuff. Definitely a lot of cool stuff in the new issue. Bob Cook's on the cover with the Jamie's Toy split window Beetle that he's resurrected from back in the day. So really cool content, a lot of good stuff in there. So definitely want something different, go subscribe today at vwtrendsmagazine.com. Also, don't forget our friends at Ross Wolf. Ross Wolf on the cutting edge of developing stuff all the time. Not just buying parts from somebody else and reselling them, but these guys are innovators. They came out earlier with the Viton oil sump gasket, which never has to be replaced, doesn't wear out, stays pliable, and solves your leaking sump issues. Next up to bat was the Viton pushrod tube seal. So go check them out today. Tired of them pushrod tubes leaking? Go to rosswolf.com and check out their Viton pushrod tube seal. So a lot of innovative stuff coming from my buddies at Ross Wolf. Staying on top of the game for the love of the hobby, not just in it for the money. So go check them out today at rosswolf.com. Well, today's episode, we got a lot going on. I want to catch you guys up real quick with some stuff that we have happened. I do have dates for the next one crazy weekend. It's going to be the first weekend in October next year, and I'm looking forward to it. We are going to be moving the car show up to the top of the parking garage, which gives us about 4 times the space, because this year, if you were there, you know we ran out of space. So we're going to have lots more space for vendors, lots more space for cars and clubs and all that good stuff. And if you know anybody who went, just ask them. I don't have to sell you on it. The greatest VW event on the West Coast that happens, that's interactive and involves not just a stale car show where you're sitting there all day, but interactive, strip cruise, poker run, good time, win some money, hang out with your friends. And this year it's going to be even bigger and better. So we'll make sure that you guys get more details that unfold, and on the next podcast, I'll be giving you all the details so you can book your room. We'll get you all the discount codes and all that stuff in the next episode. So I'm excited for that. Lots of stuff happening. Thinking about some places to go take Zorba to go get shown. I was hoping to go to Scottsdale this weekend. Unfortunately, that's not going to happen for me. So I'll be looking to take it to another show, and that's probably a topic I'll be coming up with. You know, kind of what's happening to the VW shows with respect to cars that are being displayed, and we're starting to elevate the show car end of things, where people are motivated to build some really nice cars and bring them out to put on display. Sometimes they get a little lost in the shuffle because of the chaotic way. We're going to be trying something different this year at One Crazy Weekend. We're going to have just a heavy hitter section for those people that are wanting to compete and be judged. We're going to be doing a lot of different things, more stuff unfolding every year just to try to make One Crazy Weekend the best time that you're going to have in your Volkswagen and making tons of memories. So one of the things I did recently is I was able to stumble across some podcast reviews from around the world that I wasn't able to see. And I've got a limited selection of these that I wanted to give a shout out to for these guys for giving me a 5-star review and posting something up. But I just now saw it on a different chart page where it was stuff from around the world. So after this history podcast, I'm going to go ahead and read a bunch of those reviews for those people that did give me a 5-star review, and I'll be looking to track down all the others. So today's podcast is the history of the Type 3, why Volkswagen made it, what was the plan, how it came about, and some of the details with regards to the Type 3 model. So without any further ado, guys, let's get into it this week. Type 3 history on Let's Talk Dubs.
You probably don't know that there's a new Volkswagen out that doesn't look like a Volkswagen. It's got everything that people who like the bug like. So if you happen to see a good-looking Volkswagen, don't panic.
This is the story of the Type 3 Volkswagen. Now, if you're wondering what the Type 3 is, that's the squareback, the fastback, the notchback, and the Type 34 ghia. But at the beginning, it was just the three models: the sedan, the notchback, the coupe, the Type 34 ghia, and the wagon, or variant, the squareback. Now let's start with the types. Why do they call it the Type 3? Well, the first model, the Beetle, was the Type 1. The next model, the Transporter, aka the bus, was the Type 2. By around the mid-50s, Volkswagen had started outpacing and selling incredible amounts of cars and felt that the Beetle was getting a little long in the tooth. A team assembled to start coming up with a new project. In 1945, when the British Army arrived in the town formerly known as Stat Dis KDF Wagons, now renamed Wolfsburg, it found the factory in shambles. Major Ivan Hurst of the Royal Electrical Mechanical Engineers led a team of officers that resurrected the factory and restarted production. The goal was to get the factory back up and running again and eventually turn it over to the German people. Shortly after they got it running, the British Army placed an order for 20,000 cars, which helped kick things off. They soon started exporting cars. They'd be sent places like Holland, Switzerland, Belgium, and Sweden. Dutch importer Ben Pon exported vehicles to the United States in 1949. The factory was turned over to German management in 1948. The British Army appointed Heinrich Nordhoff as managing director. He had worked for U.S.-owned Opel Car Company before the war. And in 1949, they turned over full production to the German people. By 1950, Volkswagen had produced its 100,000th Beetle. Nordhoff felt there was need to find another platform of vehicle to sell to the people. Some people thought the Volkswagen was aging, especially the Der Spiegel magazine in 1959. They had quite a long article in the magazine, and the title was "Est der VW Virilität? Is the VW obsolete?" Wondering if it would be able to compete with the Lloyd or Renault or DKW. So things started going in the direction to find a replacement for the Beetle. There were dozens of prototypes built as potential replacements for the Volkswagen Type 1. All the while, Volkswagen sales were doing great. By 1956, they had produced their 1 millionth Beetle. Volkswagen had then spent quietly about 200 million Deutschmarks behind the scenes trying to develop new models. Manufacturers like Porsche, Ghia, and Italsuce all tried their hand at building prototypes for Volkswagen. Heinz Nordhoff was working on a project when one of the major buildings at Wolfsburg factory was damaged due to a fire in the late 50s. The order came from Heinz to keep the windows boarded up after repairs were made. It was there in hiding that the Type 3 was born in 1959. By the time 1960 drew to a close, prototypes had been extensively tested and VW began gearing up for production. At the 1960 Geneva Auto Show, VW's official position was that there were no new designs in the work. Despite the secrecy, word of a new VW had been spreading. Information was sparse and unreliable. The 1959 edition of Sports Car Illustrated revealed, Volkswagen is, according to well-founded sources, going to build a car somewhat along the lines of the new Austin A40, in addition to the regular line of Beetles and Transporters. By 1960, Volkswagen was exporting 500,000 Volkswagens per year. In April of 1961, Heinz Nordhoff brought this group of dealers to the factory. Thinking they were being shown a new production area, they were loaded onto a factory bus and taken to a remote location at the plant. It was there where workers unveiled 4 cars, 3 sedans, the notchbacks, and 1 station wagon, the squareback. Volkswagen was very tight-lipped with the press. The press knew something was coming, but what? A very limited press release and real vague photos were being shown to the press. VW was hoping to build public anticipation for this new model. It worked. The press was scouting around the factory with telephoto lenses trying to get photographs of vehicles on the test track, and also some prototypes were spotted in Scandinavia. Now it's time for the big debut. It was September 1961 at the Frankfurt Auto Show. Volkswagen was the main attraction. This is where the Type 3 was first shown to the public. The all-new 1500. 4 models were displayed, the sedan being the notchback, the 1500 Cabriolet, the station wagon or squareback, and the coupe, the Type 34 ghia, and the Cabriolet version as well. Despite showing 2 convertibles, the notchback and the Type 34 ghia, those never made it to production. There was some French and English literature for the convertible, but again, those never materialized. Look at this car. It was wider than the Beetle, had a plush interior, curved windshield, padded dash, not to mention 2 trunks. The front suspension was upgraded from the Beetle. 1500cc engine, henceforth the name, the 1500 series. The engine was in the back, pancake style, or suitcase configuration. Had a full dash of gauges, 3 of them. Real futuristic push-button controls for the lights. A rear trunk light, even a rear seat armrest, since you added so much more room. This now was a real car. In the beginning, the press loved the 1500, but it wasn't long until they changed their tune. Some of the magazines even said, under extreme conditions and hard cornering, the rear wheel would lift up and the left one would fold underneath the car. Knowing this really wasn't the case, notwithstanding these rumors, it would not negatively impact the sale of the Volkswagen. And then shortly after, Volkswagen took steps to overcome the problem with the introduction of a compensating spring, the Z-bar linkage in the rear. Now let's get into production. The Type 3s had designation models. The sedan was the Type 31. The variant, or station wagon, was Type 36. And the 1500 coupe was the Type 34, with other various types throughout with different designations. For example, the panel vans are Type 36s. So let's talk production figures. In 1962, a little more than 127,000 were built. 1963, 181,809. In 1964, 262,000 were built. In 65, 261,000. And looks to be their biggest year was 1966 with 311,692 models built of the Type 3. Now, from that point forward, production drops a little bit in 67 to 201,000, 1968 to 244, in 1969 to 267, 1970 to 272. So our 2 total highest production years are 1970 with 272,000 and 1966 with 311,000 plus. Overall, total production of the Type 3 was approximately 2,587,980. Including prototypes and everything, which were built from 59 to 61, from 1962 to 1973, that was the total production. The early models of the Type 3s had a single side draft carburetor. Later, the entire fleet in around 1965 ended up with twin 32 PD SIT carburetors. Standard N model of the notchback or squareback would have had no overriders, side markers, rear armrests, pop-out windows, or passenger sun visors. The Deluxe, or the S model, came with chrome on the front hood lip, wrap-around front turn signals, chrome rear reflectors, lower side markers, larger taillights, and dual carbs. The cars had push-button dashes on the switch until about mid-year 1964. In 1965, heater valves were moved from the body to the heater boxes in mid-year. In 1966, they welcomed another model, the Fastback. That's also the year that the Type 3 was officially imported into the U.S. It also came with a 1600cc engine, disc brakes. They got rid of the side markers, switched to 4-lug wheels, and had a larger piece of chrome on the hood. Oh, and rear designed rear view mirror, front seats, door panels, armrest, and upholstery. In 1967, that's when they got dual port heads, dual reservoir master cylinder, backup lights on the bumper, and new heater levers and door locks. 1968, the D-Jetronic fuel injection and automatic transmission with IRS was available. Integrated door handle and lock, small rear reflectors, back to bullet turn signals in the front, high back seats, which everybody loved, new dash knobs, the big black rubber ones, vent wing locks, front armrests, and the variant got a redesigned license plate light. The gas filler was also moved from the front under the hood to the right front fender. 1969, that model got IRS suspension, rear window defroster standard, the fuel filler flap release from the inside of the glove box. 1970, they redesigned the entire model. Now we're sticking with the early ones, so we'll kind of break those down into three categories. There are the early ones, which are 62 through 63, mid-year 64, which are the push-button dash cars. Those are kind of the early ones. Now 64 through 65 are still early wide five cars. In 1966, everything went four lug. So that's really kind of how you break it down, and you could really make it a fourth. Fourth would have been 68 and 69, which would have been black rubber knobs on the dash, the other refinements we discussed, in addition to the gas flap on the fender on the passenger side. Along with the push-button dash, the early Type 3s had some special intricacies, you could say. One was the cable release that was working off the door striker to release the seat back where you could get your passengers into the rear seat. That only lasted for a few years. It was kind of convoluted and a little bit funky and not so reliable. The other interesting note, with the Type 3 being able to do 100 miles an hour, people started to rally these cars and actually race them for performance. Mostly the sedan, aka the notchback. VW in 1964 did a publicity stunt. Volkswagen sent a 1500S on a proving run around Australia, driven by Ray Christie and Joe Dunlop. They covered 1,300,000 kilometers in 5 days and 22 hours, driving nonstop across really rough tracks. In the process, breaking two earlier records set by drivers in an Austin Freeway and a VW Beetle in 1962 and 1963, respectively. The speeds that Christie and Dunlop achieved in their 1500S would be illegal today. They were able to sit on 100 miles an hour for hours, so their record is likely to not get broken anytime soon. The advert for Volkswagen said, "What does this amazing achievement prove? The VW 1500, expertly driven around Australia in 5 days by Ray Christie and Joe Dunlop, didn't break any records because there are no official records to break. We do know that this trip was faster than anyone has ever done it before, 2 days faster in fact, than the time taken by Ray and Joe when they did it in 1962 in a VW 1200 sedan. But we weren't setting out to prove speed, but to prove beyond a doubt VW 1500 will take anything, go anywhere, and its reliability. What a better way to prove it. Through heat, dust, mud, sand, rocks, creek beds, and the roughest country in the world, the VW 1500's flat bottom slid over rocks without the slightest damage to the gearbox, sump, or transmission. Water and dust were no problem because the VW 1500 is so tightly put together it's airtight. At the end of this trip, the VW's tires were in great shape and the radiator hadn't boiled. It can't. Volkswagen doesn't have a radiator. The engine's cooled by air, not water. It's the kind of car you get from good basic design, precision engineering, and years of work in perfecting every single part. So clearly, Volkswagen was on a mission to prove the reliability of their new 1500 sedan. Now on the early models, there were some variations in the first ones. The 1500N notchback with a single carburetor engine and basic equipment levels. The 1500N variant squareback with the single carburetor and engine and basic equipment levels. The 1500 standard notchback with most of the trimmings. The 1500 variant with most of the trimmings. The 1500S notchback with all the special trimmings and a twin carburetor engine. The 1500E notchback
as is the same as the 1500S, but with a single carburetor engine. A 1500S variant with all the special trimmings and a twin carburetor engine. The 1500E variant squareback with all the special trimmings, but only the single carburetor engine. The 1500 variant panel van is the same as the 1500N, but with no side windows. This stayed the same until 1965. Of course, people could always use the M-code options and buy specific things to customize their Volkswagen with special order options. Now, one of the big differences on the Type 3 was the chassis itself. The floor pan was wider and the entire rear frame subsection was unboltable, so that from a service standpoint, Volkswagen can completely drop the engine and transmission with 3 large bolts, dropping the whole rear set out. The front suspension had not only a single heavy-duty torsion connecting the 2 sides, but it also had built-in anti-roll bars inside the front beam.
There were many firsts with the Type 3. The first automatic transmission in a production Volkswagen. The first fuel-injected production Volkswagen, an economy car. All things considered, the Type 3 brought in a lot of different people that didn't necessarily want a Beetle, but opted for the larger, more spacious vehicle. Sales and owners of Type 3s were definitely a little bit different than Type 1 owners. And on the custom part of the hobby, the Type 3s were always a little bit out of step until about the mid-'80s, when the surf wagons became super cool and all of a sudden you needed room for a bunch of subwoofers. That's, I think, when Type 3s were really welcomed into the custom aspect of the hobby. With that surf wagon type look, tons of room for all the speakers you could handle, and a real cool look when they were lowered, it became the next evolution when you were looking to do something different and didn't just want another Beetle. Overall, in my opinion, Type 3s are some of the nicest driving Volkswagens. They were really a refined vehicle, and to find one in nice original shape is really something to behold. They're nice cars in every aspect. They're quiet. They're more heavy duty and quite a bit more substantial than a regular Beetle. You guys know my take. I love the Type 34 Ghias, and I also have a Ghia TC coming out soon. So I hope you guys enjoyed this quick run through of the Type 3 history. And if you've got any questions, feel free to email me, bill@letstalkdubs.com, and let me know your thoughts and if there's any other vehicles you'd like to get the history of. Well, if you enjoyed this podcast, make sure you guys subscribe and also forward it to all your friends that listen or would enjoy some VW content. If you want to support the podcast, go to letstalkdubs.com and click on the store tab and pick out some merch to support your favorite podcast. Now, I wanted to read some of those reviews that we received from around the world that I wasn't able to see before. The first one is from Freak Power Garage. So such a great variety of people and subjects from our fabulous hobby. My favorite episode is always the next. Harvard, Johnson, Oslo, Norway, Freak Power Garage. He gave us a 5-star review. Also, as we cruise through here, there happened to be a bunch of these that I just didn't get to see. It says, been following from the beginning, but only just thought about reviewing, but this still the best video podcast out there. Good hearing all the stories from the years ago. Also, all the new up-to-date information. Keep up the good work. Thanks for making my days go quicker at work. Robert 63 Dubber. Got one from Canada. Great show. It says lifelong VW fan, huge Let's Talk Dubs fan. Great show to learn on a variety of wide aspects of the VW life. I drive for a living and listen to at least 3 of these a day. Good thing Bill has cranked out so many shows with the industry's heavy hitters. Love seeing when the new episodes pop up. I can never wait long enough to dig into another. And it goes, he goes on to say more, but the page I'm reading them through has got a little bit of limited view. This says best and only VW podcast worth listening to. A relatively new guy to the VW scene, although owned a Bug for 10 years, finally getting around to getting it roadworthy. This show has not only inspired me to get out and work on the Bug, but introduced me to so many experts and products in the field. Keep up the amazing work. An amazing on-site into the VW world. Hey, Bill T, absolutely love the podcast. As a latecomer to the VW scene, it's so interesting to hear everyone's stories. It helps me get through my 10-hour welding shift. Keep up the good work. All the best. Vic from Dorset in the UK. Hope to see you at Volksworld. Geez, there's a ton of here from Great Britain. Just listen to the chat with the legend Ricky James. Really interesting to hear his take on the bus scene and his "It's mine, I'll do what I want" approach. Love it. Yeah, there's so many on here that I didn't get to see for so long. Top notch from another Greek in exile. Keep up the good work, bringing the community together. Greetings from Norway. That's Alexos Gidias in Norway, man. So shout out to my Greek bro in Norway. And let's see what else we got here. The best. I love this podcast. I'm inspired to put a Type 4 motor in my 1970 Notch. It was great to meet you and George at Octo. June, visit the wagon for a shop tour, George. And the kid were so generous of their time. Can't wait for the next podcast every week. Love your work, Bill. And that's Spiker75. Dub Delight, another great podcast recorded listening to the Roundtable Gathering of Americans, a Scotsman, Englishman, true Volkswagen legend. Chew the fat over one crazy weekend really made me jealous. I'm going to have to add this event to the bucket list for next year. Congratulations, Bill. And that's Husky Dog in New Zealand. First U.S. show, absolutely amazing show. The quality of the cars were great. Bill, listening to your podcast makes me feel like I've known you forever, and for you to let my wife and myself join you for Friday night's cruise one crazy weekend was chart topping for me. Thanks again, Rob Briggs, Toronto and the Netherlands. Great story. Great to hear all those VW stories from all over the world. Greats from the Netherlands, Rotterdam, Dennis Cruis, 70 early bay. Yeah, that's Dennis that we did a little video on his car. Bathroom tiling, some amazing podcasts with some great content and insights into places you wouldn't normally have access to. Make tiling my bathroom almost bearable, Carl. So let's see here. Absolutely the best video podcast in the world. Loads of great stories, fun facts, serious history facts too. Well done, Bill T. Keep going. Love my Friday fix. That's this guy, Russell, in Scotland. Let's see here. Man, so many of these podcasts that I just didn't get a chance to. Only just discovered this so much. Cool stuff on here. Been in a dub since 88 when me and my dad restored my first bug. So interesting to hear from both legends of the scene and what's happening now, Stu, East Coast, UK. And John C. Drag racing in the UK with a VW DRC, building a sand rail to race with a built Type 1 from the 90s drag car. I was told had a connection with John Mayer, Dick Nuss, mate. Send me a link to the podcast. I've been catching up since. Great history and really interesting podcast. That's John, the Sparky. And Australia. Good day. I found the show through Tori Alonso's Instagram page. I found Tori through the socials back in the day. I spent plenty of time in the car community, and I'm always searching for the next podcast to sink my teeth into. I run a business called Tassie's VW Pickers, which is in Tasmania, Australia, and I buy and sell farm fresh VWs and secondhand parts. I live and breathe Volkswagens, and being able to tell the story behind the metal is what I find important. It's great to hear that the VW scene is so strong, and the podcast such as Let's Talk Dubs keeps the scene fresh and current whilst playing homage to the people that have helped contribute to what has made it today. When I'm workshop bound in the car or just needing motivation to wrench on a never-ending project, I'm catching up on the 250 plus episodes. Haven't listened to yet. Keep up the great work. Cheers, Bill T. William Tassie VW Pickers. Well, that's what I got caught up on, guys. If you left a review and I didn't give you a podcast, make sure you send me a message at my email, which was posted before. And until next week, guys, later.
You probably don't know that there's a new Volkswagen out that does